There's a moment in life when something inside you changes. It's not loud, it's not a snap, it's a silence, a kind of silence that makes you look at the world and realize something simply doesn't make sense anymore. Carl Jung used to say, "Who looks outside dreams, but who looks inside awakens." And it's in this awakening, this spiritual awakening, that everything starts to change. Slowly. Spiritually awakened people don't wake up one day and decide, "Okay, I've changed." No, they start to let go. They let go slowly, like someone loosening the knots of an old rope. And little by little, they release the invisible weight they've always carried. At first, the awakening is confusing. The mind resists. The heart tries to understand. You feel like you don't fit anymore, not in places, not in conversations, not in old ambitions. But it's not the world that changed. It's you. You began to see with different eyes, eyes that now perceive the energy behind words, the intention behind actions, and the vibration behind appearances. The first thing spiritually awakened people set aside is the need to prove anything. They stop chasing approval, recognition, status. They discover that true prosperity isn't in others' gaze, but in the harmony of one's own being. And that's where inner peace is born, the kind that comes when you realize spiritual life isn't about fleeing the world, but living in it with balance and faith. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the return to essence, to what's authentic, to what vibrates at the frequency of the soul. And it's curious because that return demands detachment. Spiritually awakened people slowly give up comparison. They stop measuring their own worth with someone else's ruler. They understand that abundance and prosperity don't arise from striving to be better, but from the ability to be in harmony with the universe. And you know what else they abandon? Haste. Haste is the poison of consciousness. The modern world turned time into an enemy and anxiety into routine. But those who awaken spiritually start to move differently. They walk more slowly, speak with more presence, feel more deeply. It's not laziness, it's wisdom. It's the body aligning to the rhythm of the soul. These people begin to realize that spiritual life isn't in distant temples, but in the now, in the coffee sipped with gratitude, in the mindful breath before sleep, in the compassionate look toward a stranger. Spiritual awakening turns the everyday into guided meditation. Every gesture becomes a prayer, every silence a connection with the universe. And at this pace, transformation happens. Little by little, spiritually awakened people start to give up the need to control everything. They realize control is a mental illusion, an attempt to hold back the tide with bare hands. And then they release, they trust. They start living by faith, understanding that life is a dance between the visible and the invisible. Jung said, "What we resist persists, and what we accept transforms." That's why true spiritual awakening isn't about defeating fear, but looking at it with love. Accepting that it's also part of the journey and that without it there is no evolution. At this point, those who awaken begin to abandon judgment. Judging others becomes heavy. Judging oneself becomes useless. Spiritual energy flows more lightly when there is gratitude. Gratitude for being alive, for learning, for making mistakes, and moving forward. Judgment is replaced by compassion, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Those who awaken understand that each person is on their own rhythm, their own path to enlightenment. And there comes a time when silence becomes more important than opinion. Spiritually awakened people stop arguing to be right. They trade the need to win for a deep desire to understand. And that's where the true power of the mind is born, the ability to manifest peace even amid chaos. But this process is not quick. It's slow, painful sometimes, because everything you give up seems to tear off a piece of what you thought you were. You leave behind ideas, beliefs, labels, and in exchange gain lightness, clarity, expansion of consciousness. Those who awaken spiritually gradually stop feeding on drama. Conflicts lose their flavor. Arguments lose their meaning. Spiritual energy rejects chaos. And the mind starts to seek the natural balance of things, that point where love becomes more important than ego. And when the ego begins to quiet down, something magical happens. Abundance flows, not because you chase it, but because you've become worthy of it. Life stops being a struggle and becomes co-creation. You begin to understand spiritual laws, especially the law of attraction, not as tricks to get what you want, but as a way to align the vibration of your being with what the universe wants to give you. Carl Jung believed the soul has a symbolic language, and that everything that happens to us is in some way a message from the unconscious trying to guide us back home. Those who awaken spiritually start to read those messages. Signs appear in dreams, synchronicities, numbers, improbable coincidences, and you realize nothing is by chance. Spiritual life becomes a constant dialogue between the self and the whole. And little by little, the need to be understood dissolves. The spiritually awakened person understands that not everyone is ready to hear what they feel, and that's okay. They learn to keep their wisdom in silence, not out of fear, but out of respect for each one's process. They know that expansion of consciousness is a seed that sprouts at the right time. But there's something even subtler they abandon, and few notice it. Awakened people begin to give up guilt. Guilt is a prison of the past, and the past is a place that no longer exists. They learn to live in the now, with a clean heart, a free spirit, and the certainty that every mistake was just a teacher in disguise. Little by little, they also stop seeking happiness as a destination. They discover that happiness isn't at the top of a mountain, but in the small blessings along the way. In each mindful breath, in each act of quiet love, in each gesture of faith. True inner wealth is born when you understand that nothing is lacking, and that prosperity is above all a state of soul. But here comes a crucial point: the difference between true awakening and superficial awakening. Many talk about spirituality, but few live it, because real awakening requires courage to let go of what no longer serves, even if it hurts. And spiritually awakened people do this slowly, not because they're afraid, but because they understand that every part that loosens must be honored before it goes. When the being starts to release what is no longer theirs, life responds. It's almost imperceptible at first. Days feel lighter, the air quieter, and even problems, the ones that once looked like mountains, become just stones along the way. Spiritually awakened people realize that the law of attraction isn't a technique, but a natural consequence of the inner state. When the heart vibrates in peace, the universe returns in harmony. When the mind emanates gratitude, life expands in blessings. And when the spirit finds balance, prosperity becomes inevitable. But what's curious is that this prosperity isn't necessarily material. It comes as clarity, synchronicities, intuitions. It comes when you ask for an answer, and suddenly the right book falls into your hands, or when someone shows up with the exact words you needed to hear. This is the kind of manifestation that Carl Jung called synchronicity, the instant when the unconscious and the universe speak the same language. Spiritually awakened people learn to trust these signs. They no longer need proof because they feel the vibration of truth within themselves. External judgment loses its power, and inner faith grows stronger. And that's why slowly they set aside the fear of loneliness. For those who awaken, loneliness stops being an emptiness and becomes a temple. It's in silence that they find the voice of the soul again. And the more they dive into themselves, the more they realize they were never alone. The spiritual energy of the universe was always there, waiting for the right moment to be heard. They start giving up superficial conversations, draining relationships, places that no longer vibrate at the same frequency. There's no more anger, nor escape. There's only understanding. Like someone who looks at the ocean and understands that not every wave is meant to be surfed. Some are only meant to be observed and allowed to pass. Spiritual awakening is a process of polishing. You begin hard, raw, full of layers of fear, beliefs, and conditioning. And with time, life polishes you. Every pain, every loss, every disappointment is a divine sandpaper, shaping the diamond you are within. And that shine cannot be bought, cannot be imitated. It is born of spiritual self-knowledge. Jung said, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That's why those who awaken spiritually do not run from the shadow. They face it, sit with it, learn from it. Because they understand that the shadow isn't the enemy, but the teacher, pointing to where resistance still lives. And the more you embrace your shadows, the more light manifests within you. It's a beautiful paradox. The path of illumination passes through the valley of shadows. The soul must cross the dark night to see the sunrise. And that sunrise doesn't come from outside. It rises within. Spiritually awakened people slowly give up the fight against themselves. They stop self-sabotaging, stop blaming themselves, stop hiding. They discover that the true power of the mind lies in acceptance. And from there, everything changes. Food changes, music changes, desires change. Even the body starts asking for different things, lighter, more natural, purer. It's as if the soul, now awakened, began choosing what vibrates at the same frequency as spiritual life. They feel repulsion for empty arguments, heavy content, environments that vibrate fear. And that's okay. It's the call of harmony. These people stop chasing happiness and start cultivating inner peace. They understand that happiness is unstable. It comes and goes. But peace, that remains. Peace is the spirit's home. And when someone learns to live within it, the whole world becomes home. Curiously, detachment doesn't make them cold, it makes them loving. Love ceases to be a need and becomes an offering. They love because love is their nature, not a bargaining chip. And ironically, when they stop searching, conscious love appears. Not the love to fill voids, but to share fullness. Jung spoke of the sacred marriage between the conscious and the unconscious, the balance between the masculine and the feminine within us. Those who awaken spiritually experience this as energetic balance. The chakras align, vital energy flows, and the being begins to emanate serenity. No need to say anything, presence already heals. And that's where inner healing arises. Healing doesn't come from outside, nor from a master, nor from a ritual. It comes from the instant when mind, body, and spirit start talking again. When thought stops fighting feeling, and feeling returns to trusting life. From then on, spiritual energy flows without blockage, and what used to be pain becomes expansion of consciousness. Spiritually awakened people also stop seeking immediate answers. They learn to listen to time. They know there are blessings that only manifest when you're ready to receive them. And there's no use forcing the bud to bloom before spring. Their faith is mature, not desperate, but trusting. Many call this flow, but it's more than that. It's conscious co-creation. It's realizing that you and the universe are dancing together, and that each step you take is answered by a cosmic movement. It's feeling that life watches you, guides you, protects you, and that everything has purpose, even what you don't understand yet. And here emerges one of the greatest transformations. Spiritually awakened people slowly give up the fear of death. They perceive that death isn't the end, but a return to the source, to the energy that always was and always will be. They understand we're eternal travelers, changing form but never essence. This understanding brings freedom, the freedom to live without haste, without guilt, without desperation, to be fully present in each experience, because eternity reveals itself in the now. And when they allow themselves to live like this, everything begins to blossom. Prosperity manifests naturally, ideas flow, opportunities appear, financial blocks dissolve. Not because they run after them, but because their vibration has changed. The universe responds to vibration, not to will. And here is a secret few understand. True financial unblocking is spiritual. When you heal your beliefs of scarcity, the flow of abundance is restored. It's the energy of worthiness that opens the doors of the material world. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's why spiritually awakened people take responsibility for their own reality. They no longer victimize themselves, no longer blame the government, the past, or others. They know that everything they live is a reflection of what they carry within. And when something hurts, they look inward. When something goes wrong, they ask themselves, "What is this trying to teach me?" This simple habit changes everything. It turns crisis into growth and chaos into revelation. Because what once seemed like punishment is now seen as polishing. Spiritual awakening also brings greater sensitivity. Emotions become more intense. Empathy increases. Sometimes that's scary. But that's when discernment comes in. Awakened people learn to balance heart and reason, to not absorb the world's pain, but to transmute it. They use guided meditation as an anchoring tool. Breath becomes prayer, visualization, a portal of healing, and silence, the place where the soul realigns with the universe. At times, the ego tries to come back, wants recognition, wants spotlight, wants applause. But those who have tasted the flavor of peace don't trade it for any showcase. They realize that true success mindset isn't about having more, but being more conscious. And when the being expands, having happens as a consequence. That's when awakening stops being theory and becomes practice. They apply spirituality at work, in relationships, in daily decisions. They stop reacting and start responding. They stop judging and start understanding. And life, previously chaotic, becomes a natural flow of learning and gratitude. There comes a point when transformation stops being effort and becomes breathing. The awakened being no longer tries to become better. They simply are. They live in the present with lightness, with that calm glow of someone reconciled with their own destiny. These people discover that life is a mirror. Everything they offer returns multiplied. When they emanate gratitude, they receive abundance. When they emanate faith, they receive direction. When they emanate love, the universe moves in their favor. Carl Jung believed the collective unconscious carries all the stories of humanity, and that by healing oneself, each individual helps heal the world. That's why spiritual awakening is never just personal. It's a silent service, a vibration that touches those nearby even without words. Spiritually awakened people slowly give up the need to change others. They understand that no one awakens by imposition, but by inspiration. So they live the example. They transform their own energy and let the world watch. This is the purest form of manifestation, the vibration that teaches without teaching. Over time, a sweet sense of freedom arises. Freedom to be imperfect, to make mistakes and start over without self-punishment. To not know all the answers and still trust the process. The awakened heart doesn't fear the unknown. It welcomes it as part of the journey. Spirituality stops being a refuge and becomes a way of living. It's in how you get up in the morning, how you speak to yourself, how you look at another. It's a constant practice of spiritual self-knowledge, an exercise in presence. Every gesture becomes meditation, every pause, prayer. Spiritually awakened people also learn to laugh at themselves. Humor returns, light, compassionate, disarmed. Laughing at old worries is a sign of healing. It's the ego surrendering to the soul. And this lightness opens space for more light, more prosperity, more harmony. As time goes by, they realize that life purpose isn't in one grand feat, but in small acts of consciousness, helping someone without expecting return, caring for nature, listening without judging. They are simple gestures, but they carry the energy of expansion of consciousness, and when purpose is lived with authenticity, the universe aligns. Projects bloom, relationships find balance, the flow of prosperity becomes natural. Life begins to cooperate, because the being has learned to cooperate with it. Everything that was once resistance is now dance. Spiritual awakening is, therefore, a long farewell. Farewell to haste, guilt, fear, control. But it's also a reunion with faith, with serenity, with unconditional love. And that love has no shape or limit. It is the very substance of life. Jung said that the supreme task of man is to become conscious of what he already is. Spiritually awakened people live exactly that. They don't seek to be something else. They simply remember what they always were, fragments of the divine experiencing matter. There's a moment at the end of this journey when silence returns, the same silence from the beginning, but now it doesn't feel strange. Now it is home. Silence becomes company, wisdom, creative energy. And in this silence, the awakened being understands. The path doesn't end, it only changes form. Because awakening isn't a destination, it's a cycle. You awaken, you let go, you expand, and then you awaken again on another level. It's an eternal spiral of transformation and illumination, guided by the power of the mind and by the connection with the universe. Those who arrive here realize there is no turning back. Once consciousness expands, it can't shrink again. The mind may doubt, but the heart already knows. And knowing is the first step to living in fullness. So when someone asks you what changed after your awakening, maybe you'll smile and say, I simply started to give up, slowly. I gave up fear. I gave up haste. I gave up trying to control what was always greater than me, and by giving up, I finally lived. And perhaps this is the true meaning of Jung's words. Spiritually awakened people don't lose anything. They only release what is no longer love. And when all that remains is love, there's nothing left to give up. Now, close your eyes. Breathe. Feel the air entering and leaving your body. Feel spiritual energy coursing through every part of you, dissolving tension, opening paths. Feel the abundance that has always been there. Prosperity flowing, balance returning. You are exactly where you should be. And when you open your eyes, carry this awareness with you. You are not awakened to flee the world. You are awakened to transform it, starting from within.